Howdy folks, Rob, MaximumRD here, and I'm just going to say right off the cuff here, if you're watching this video, then it means that I took one shot at recording it and decided it would be good enough to upload. So that's good, I guess. For a while now, you may notice that my videos have been few and far between. This is because there's many other priorities and things going on in my life right now that even when I get an idea to do a video, it's like, you know, I put the time aside, I make the effort, one slight thing goes wrong and I friggin' lose it and I just stop recording because of these other things going on in my life. These other priorities, these other issues. I don't like to come onto camera, or even people who know me on Facebook or other social media. I'm not one to hang out all my laundry and gossip and dwell and go on about issues and things like that, or make excuses or whatever, apologize for not uploading, blah blah blah. Life is life. We all have things that we're going through. Sometimes those pressures seem to be even more so this time of the year. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to get into all these details or things like that. But this is the reason. I'm stating a fact that, you know, my videos are so few and far in between. So when I do a video like this and you actually see it, it means that I made a single effort to do the video and it came out to my satisfaction at the very least, and I decided to just go ahead and upload it. This is such a video. So with all that said, this is one of those things that I was actually reading or watching a video on YouTube and reading some articles and just stumbled upon some things regarding emulation. As you can see in the title, that's the point here. And I had some thoughts and I began typing my own comment. Actually, I did type out a comment on a particular video that I was watching about the Raspberry Pi 3, actually one of those kits that you can get for the Raspberry Pi 3. And I thought, you know, I'm thinking all these things, I'm typing all these things out, and, you know, why not just commit these ideas to a video like this and see what other people are thinking. I was just going to post in my Facebook Classic Gaming group, you know, what forms of emulation are other people using, what do they have a preference for, what do they like, etc. But then again, I thought, well, Rob, you could just post that question, or you could post it in the form of a video, which is what this is. And so what was on my mind is, here's the thing, I love emulation. So right away there's what is it, a sect, a group, a club, no, of people who hate emulation. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they dislike it or maybe they find it annoying. They hate it with a passion for some reason. I always find that kind of thing funny, because why would you like hate? And don't get me wrong here, like right away some of you are already thinking, well, this is why, and I hate it because... Okay, that's fine, but it is merely an option. It's a means to an end. Nobody is forcing you to do it or to engage in it or to partake in it. So when I get a sense of or see a response of such passionate, heartfelt hatred for something, I always find it really weird, unless it's like, I don't know, did a box of, I know this sounds a little silly, but did a box of ROMs fall on your head or something? Like, what is making you so aggravated against the concept of emulation? I mean, there's things about it that peeve me off, in a sense that, like, when I see people trying to profit off it, in the sense that they're packaging ROMs and they're selling them on eBay for ridiculous prices, or, you know, things like that. I can understand being mad at that or being angered. And, you know, there are people who will just go through these things and report them and report them and report them, and that's good, that's interesting, but in the end you'll never accomplish anything, because as soon as one thing is taken down, another one appears. And I kind of got to the point where it was like, buyer beware. You know, if people are going to pay, or if someone's willing to take their hard-earned cash and give it to somebody for something that you can obtain for free, well, I don't know. At this point, I blame the buyer. You know, and I know a lot of people right away, they're going, oh, that's not right. You shouldn't be like that. You should try to help people. Well, you know what? Sometimes people have to wake up, you know. The con, the snake oil salesman, the rip-off artists have been around since the beginning of transactions, okay? So in this day and age, there's no reason for people to be so uninformed and naive and stuff like that. The information's out there. You either make use of it, you use it to your advantage, or you don't. So I don't, while I dislike sellers, and I don't like people, or even people who resell, and or they try to do things like they get the latest Nintendo plug and play, and they hoard them and they sell them on eBay for inflated prices, all that kind of stuff. I hate those people. It's not something I would do. I don't choose to do that. And those people are, well, they're scum. But again, it's supply and demand. People, they can only profit from other people's whatever, laziness, lack of knowledge, so on and so forth. So I don't, you know, I think people have to wake up to these things. If you take away the demand, then they will no longer be there to supply it. So I've gone way off track. So again, if you're watching this video, it's a miracle I even bothered to upload it. But going back to that, or my original question, emulation, what do you like about it? And again, this isn't a video for people who absolutely hate emulation. I get it. If you don't like it, fine. That's your thing. But there are a lot of people who do enjoy emulation. For myself, I've enjoyed emulation for as long as I can remember. Probably dating back as far as emulating a Commodore 64 on an Amiga computer. I loved my Amiga, and excuse me, I think somebody had some homebrewer or developer created a program to emulate a Commodore 64 on the Amiga, and me being somebody who moved on to the Amiga from the Commodore 64, I found this absolutely fascinating. I mean, you know, yes, my Amiga had way better colors and sound and graphic capability and things I could do with it. But man, I did miss playing some of my original Commodore 64 demos and games and stuff like that. So anyway, one thing led to another, and at some point I was emulating a Commodore 64 on the Amiga computer, and that was just incredible to me. That was just mind-blowing. You know, I mean, this was a form of backwards compatibility for one thing. That's a whole other thing if we're going to get into that. But emulation, I was fascinated with it right from that point, and I loved it, and I said, this is something that's always going to be important, and something that's going to that a lot of people are going to be interested in. And we all know how that's evolved to this day, whether it would be legal emulators by companies like Nintendo and Microsoft using it to obtain backwards compatibility on their own systems, to you know, let's just say the preservation of classic arcade games, games that were never even packaged commercially for home video game players on their consoles. I mean, let's face it, if you think of a game like Street Fighter or Street Fighter 2, more commonly, Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, Turbo Edition, all these stuff, you could probably find dozens of different ways to play those original games on legally on hardware. But then, you know, you have your obscure arcade games. Maybe you can think of an arcade game that you remember playing as a kid in the arcade that you've never seen again. It was by some obscure company, or maybe, you know, a company like Taito, or you know, Exidy, or, you know, some company like that. That may not be that uncommon, but certain titles under their umbrella were uncommon. So, you know, for every Bump and Jump and Karate Champ arcade game, you had some obscure knockoff or less successful arcade title that you've basically never seen again since you saw it in the arcade as a kid. And what, you know, but then, you know, you have MAME, Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator, came along long ago when it did, and it actually gave you the option on your PC to play pretty much most or the majority of these arcade games. It's improved from year to year. The ROM set size has expanded, and some will say, you know, exploded to a crazy size and stuff like that. Or you can pick and choose if you like. You can use a ROM verification utility and just compile packages of your favorite games. Me, I like having the whole current available ROM set on my desktop just to be there. There's probably some titles I'll never even see, but just knowing that they're there, I like that. And so preservation is another unique thing about emulation. And then, of course, there's the gray area, then there's the dark area, and there's the completely illegal area. You know, there are those who will defend until they're blue in the face that, you know, if you download this 30-year-old arcade game and play it on your desktop, you are evil and breaking the law and should be punished to the full extent of the law. Okay, again, everyone has their opinion on that. I'm not here to be your moral guide or judge. Myself, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Everyone will have their own limit and their own idea where the line should be drawn, or where it can be overstepped, and everyone will have their own idea about that. And you can go on forums and sites and see this discussion endlessly go on and on and on and on. Like with most things, from politics to whatever, it's just never ending, and everyone's got their own 2 cents on the subject, and that's fine. But like for me, myself, I believe that, again, whether legal or not, I believe there's something to be said, one, for the preservation of games. If you are going to rely on the companies or manufacturer of these original arcade or even home video games to be the one that will preserve it for all time, even companies like Nintendo, well, I think you're rather foolish. They will be happy, again, just using Nintendo as a you know, as a guide, as an example. So Nintendo fanboys, don't get your panties all in a bunch. I'm a big fan of Nintendo myself. But Nintendo, yeah, they'll preserve certain titles for you and happily do it, and they'll happily sell you that same title over and over and over and over. You get where I'm going here, to you again. And again, fine. There's people willing, for every new Nintendo platform they buy or service, they're willing to pay that $2, $5, $10 again for that 30-year-old game. Fine. I'm of the belief that if you bought it once, then you are entitled to play it on any platform at any time. Again, my belief. I will even go as far as to say that when it comes to outdated games, games that are 20, 30 years old, that you know, I don't have a problem or issue with you downloading it and running it in an emulator at any time. Again, that's me. You may not agree with that, and that is fine. I'm not arguing with you. Because again, to me, that is preservation and enjoyment. You just want to play the game, have some fun. Is somebody going to care about that obscure game in another 30, 40, 50, 100 years? Maybe not. You know, if you have that ROM on your hard drive and you know, on a backup of that, and you pass on, are you going to pass it on to a family member? Will it truly be preserved? Maybe not. But I just, for 20, 30-year-old games, I just don't have a problem with somebody who really wants to experience that but doesn't want to buy it. First of all, from the original company, even if they're even making it available, yeah, you'll always be able to buy whatever Super Mario Brothers 2 in ROM form off a Nintendo service. But what about one of their more obscure games that they've never repackaged or never made available? Again, should you not download and play that because Nintendo hasn't made it available? I don't think so. Is Nintendo really going to care? Well, here's the funny thing about that, and I think even some of you Nintendo fanboys will totally agree, and I'm not using fanboy in a derogatory mean, it's just a fact. There are some of you out there, and the audience who's watching this will agree with me, I think can speak from experience. Some of the fanboys out there at Nintendo have been more offended and annoyed and angry over somebody's use of a obscure Nintendo ROM than Nintendo themselves ever would be. I can guarantee you this. It's really kind of weird sometimes. But I digress. Again, everyone's got their own opinion on that. I think emulation is great from the standpoint of preserving, enjoying. Where I do have an issue, again, as I said, if somebody compiles whatever, here's the Nintendo 8-bit or 16-bit or Sega Genesis 8 or 16-bit or TurboGrafx or whatever package of ROMs, all they've done is download it, stuck it on a disk or even a hard drive, and they're charging you an amount. They're profiting off of it, and I mean profiting, okay? If somebody truly packages these things on a hard drive or a set of, you know, CDs or DVDs, optical media, they take the time to download it, package it, ship it out, whatever. If they're only charging, if they are actually only charging, and it could be like a friend I know, you know, if I know a friend across the city who's done all this, you know, and I'll throw them whatever. I'll throw them $5. $5 for the media. Well, of course, if it's compiled onto a hard drive, to cover the cost of the hard drive for, you know, whatever. And they say, you know, a little bit, just a small amount for the time and effort. Again, if somebody's willing to do that and you're willing to pay, I don't have a problem with that. I've done it myself, meaning I've bought complete MAME ROM sets on DVD or hard drive, and I didn't mind paying for it. Unfortunately, some people will do this and they'll ask for astronomical prices for these services or ROMs and things like that. That's where I have a problem, because this is not done in the spirit of preservation or even the spirit of distributing to somebody who may want these things. It is done merely for greed. That's where I have a problem with it. So again, even if you're going to distribute 20, 30-year-old games, I don't have a problem, as long as you are not asking above the amount of what it actually cost you to provide that. But if you're asking for a profit on top of that of $20, $30, $40, $50, etc., then I have a problem. I think I think that's wrong. So yeah, those are some of my views on emulation. Again, some of you will agree with me. Some of you will go even farther and say, well, I think you can do this and this and that, which I may not agree with. And some will just stop right before that and say, Rob, no, none of that should be legal. And again, I'm not arguing with anybody. But I don't think there's denying the fact that emulation exists. It has existed pretty much as soon as there were more than one platform out there for playing games, and people wanted a means of obtaining or playing games that they couldn't find, or to get the hard copy of it was extremely prohibitive or out of their reach. You know, it comes to a point where it's like, where is it reasonable? You know, like, if it's a game you actually like absolutely love, let's just say something like Resident Evil, okay, you absolutely love this game, then you should find a hard copy, and if you have to pay $10, $20, then you should pay that. But if this game becomes so rare that they're now asking $40, $50, $60, $100, the true hardcore collectors are happy to pay that and buy it, and pay that amount and have that original in their collection. Somebody just wants to play it, I don't see. Then I say stick a mod chip in your system and burn a copy and go ahead and play it. Again, as long as you're not redistributing that and asking for some stupid amount of money, I don't have a problem with it. So it's all different levels. It's all different views. People have their own idea of it. I've never hidden behind the fact that I do emulate, that I do use ROMs, that I do mod chip my systems. I'm happy with doing that, and I frankly don't care what anybody else thinks about it. And by that same token, they're free to tell me what they think about that. That's fine. It won't make any difference to me. But again, you wouldn't catch me redistributing these things, let alone asking for money for these things. I don't think that's right. So I don't know. It's, you know, what's your opinion on that? But I've gone this real long way around because it just kind of turned into a discussion. And those of you that are still with me to this day know that that's what Rob's like. He just goes off on tangents. He starts talking about one thing and just goes in all kinds of directions. But the original idea how this started was, I was going to ask you, for those of you who do like to emulate and do enjoy it and have nothing against emulation or using ROMs or ISOs or image files, what have you, to play emulate and to run emulators and play those classic games, or, you know, less than classic games. What I wanted to ask you was, is your favorite means of doing so? I've had, as I said, back on the Amiga computer, I ran a Commodore 64 emulator, and since that time, oh my God, how many different ways? How do I emulate? Let me count the ways. I've done it through running, upgrading the firmware on a PSP, a handheld Sony PSP, hacked firmware to run unsigned code. That was great for running original PlayStation games. And of course, all kinds of emulators, great emulators came out for the PSP. I've also, only a few years back, actually started to enjoy using a modded original Xbox, which is, a lot of you know, that's a great way to run arcade games, all kinds of emulators for consoles, even some older computers. A modded Xbox is a wonderful thing. Of course, you know, given the option, my go-to way of emulating everything would be on a Windows desktop PC, depending on how powerful your hardware is. But you can get away anything from a, let's say, well, let's just go bottom line, modern nowadays, an i3, you know, will probably just run about anything. Then if you want to get into PS2 or Saturn emulation or GameCube, Wii, stuff like that, you might want to bump up the CPU and have a half decent graphics card, you know, if you want to do that. great way to do all these things. You know, my computer is about 10 years old now, or, you know, geez, God, going on that now. But I, you know, with its dual core CPU and dedicated graphics, I can still do up to PS2 and Wii stuff pretty well. But you know, I've got a modded Wii, an original Wii that's modded, still basically just sitting in the closet collecting dust, unfortunately. But I still want to do more with that at some point. What else? Oh, Android, the Android platform. Oh my God, I run tons of emulators. I think Android's a great platform. I think a Vita looks pretty cool, a Sony Vita. I've never used any form of Pi. Raspberry Pi 1, 2, 3. I guess if I were to get one, I'd get a 3. That's how the idea for this whole video actually started. I was watching an older video on a kit of a Raspberry Pi 3 controller, little wireless keyboard, and everything you needed in a complete package. I'm lazy these days, so I tend to just would want to buy a complete kit if I were in a position to do any of this. That's probably the route I would go. Yeah, so I guess the question of this video is, what is your favorite way to emulate? What platform do you like to use to emulate? What would you recommend? I think Raspberry Pi, you know, I'm almost sick to death of all the videos and articles and things on Raspberry Pi, but then again, I think, you know, there must be a reason for that. People seem to be enjoying it. Getting the Raspberry Pi, sticking it in whatever custom case they're nostalgic for, and doing it that way. So a lot of you people who like to do it yourself, you know, you'll use a Raspberry Pi. You know, we had an attempt with the Ouya Android system, the fundraised, crowdfunded Ouya, but that's kind of died out. And but so, I know some of you are still kicking it with an Ouya, and you're perfectly happy with that. As I said, I'm quite happy with the original Xbox. But you know, this hardware gets older, it dies out and stuff like that. So maybe the idea of using the cheaper Raspberry Pi is the way to go as well, because you know, they're cheap, they're plentiful, and a lot of people seem to be enjoying putting together custom packages for that. What do you think about that? So that's it. A long, very long, rambling video that if you're watching, it's a miracle that I bothered to even upload. So tell me what you think. What's your favorite way to emulate? And that's my question and some of my views on emulation. And I don't know if I'll have another video before Christmas, but if I don't, Merry Christmas to all of you, and have a great holiday. Whatever greeting floats your boat, consider me saying it now. All right, so Rob, MaximumRD out. Talk to you at some point later. Bye.